Hello everyone, welcome to Skill Wisdom videos. Please subscribe to our channel and press on bell icon to get a notification on new videos. You can also use comment section to post your queries. We will try to address them with the priorities. You can also follow our Facebook page and join our Telegram group for technology related discussion and updates. So these links you can find it on video description section. So this video we are developing a framework. Okay, so for this framework what we are using is we are using a Mavin project. So let's create a Mavin project here. I'm just going to new, then go to others. You can just type it as a Mavin. So if somebody don't know what is this Mavin project and how to install this Mavin, please watch our setup video on Mavin. Click on next. So once you click on next button, so if this check mark is selected, right, so you can deselect it and just click on next. So it will ask you group ID and artifact ID. You can give any name for group ID and artifact ID. Click on finish. So as soon as you click on finish, it will start building your Maven project. You can see here in the bottom, the Maven project is 99%, right? So it's building a Maven project. So just expand this. You can check the GRE version here. It's 1.5, right? So if you want to change the GRE version, what you need to do, you need to just right click on it, then go to build path, configure build path, then just select that GRE version and click on edit and change it to the latest version what that is installed on your machine. So now as we are developing a framework, right, so what we'll do, so we'll clean up this folder. I will just delete unwanted folders here. You can keep it if anyone want these folders, they can keep it, but I wanted to I don't want these folders, just I am deleting those things. And even I don't want this src folder also, I will delete this. Now let's open this pom.xml. So once this POM opens, by default it will select this overview tab. Just click on this pom.xml. So here you need to configure all the dependency now, right? If there are any default dependencies, you just delete it, then add the required dependency. I have added 4 dependency here. This is for your Selenium and other 3 are for Maven. Okay, so once you add these dependencies, if you save it, your build process will start. You can see that on right bottom corner. So after saving this, if you're not getting any error, that means you have done a configuration in the right way. There is no error. Okay, so now configuration is ready. Let's close this. Okay, so first folder what we'll do, we'll create one source folder. If you go to new, you can see here source folder, right? You just select this and type test. You can either type it in small letters or capital letter. So one folder will be created here. So this is the folder where we are going to write a test case in our framework. So inside this source folder, either you can create a package if you want, okay, or you can directly create a class. Now I have just created a package. So let's start with the first test case. Okay, I'll create a class. Okay, so the my first test case is login. So I will make it as a TC login test case, right? So let's select this main. So now here you need to write your test case, right? So that test case is like you need to create your driver file, driver object, then you need to open to a particular URL and do blah blah these things. The problem with this approach is one class can have only one main function and you can write only one test case, right? If you have 10 test case like this, you need to create a 10 classes, right? And tomorrow if you want to run all 10 test case at a time, is it possible for you? No, right? Because you need to open each class separately, then you need to click on run. So to avoid that thing, instead of creating a Java class here, we need to make use of TestNG in our framework. So in order to use TestNG, what you need to do, if you right click on your project, then go to build path, go to configure build path. So here you can see TestNG, right? If this is not there, that means TestNG is not installed in your machine. So in order to set up this TestNG, please watch my previous video on how to configure TestNG in your Eclipse if it is not found. Okay, so click on library, then click on add library. Select TestNG. Next, click on finish. Click on finish. So now TestNG is configured for your project. So when TestNG is configured, so you no need to create a main method here. So if you want to create any function, what you need to do here, you need to just write a function like public void. Let's say this is my TC1. Okay. So this is test case one, right? How do you say test cases in TestNG? If you want to make this function as a test case, then you need to add annotation called @test. So @test, which will indicate the below function is test case. So you can pick from org.testng. Don't pick it from org.jnet. You need to select it from org.testng. Okay. Now this is your test case. So now what do you mean by this test case? Test case means, so right now you are trying to automate a series of manual steps into a automation code using a Selenium, right? So let's not to concentrate on what is that, a series of steps we are going to automate. So instead of that, what I will do here, I will just add one printf statement which will indicate a number of steps that we need to perform. Okay, so I'll call this one as a TC1. Okay, so when you want to perform this series of steps, what you need to do? So first thing, you need to open a browser, right? So let's say I will create a Chrome browser here. I believe that everybody is already know about how to create a driver. So I have just created a driver object for Chrome driver. Okay, Chrome driver. Now driver object is created. So once you create a driver object, in order to perform these steps, you need to navigate to particular URL, right? So I don't have any specific URL at this point. So just what I'm doing, I'm using this XYZ here. Okay. So once you open the URL, then you need to perform this series of steps, right? So let's correct this HTTP. So once you perform all your steps, then what you need to do? You need to quit your driver, right? So this set of steps are called one test case, right? So if you try to compare this test case with a number of test cases, usually what happens is this first part will be common and last part will also be a common for all the test case, only this middle part. So for test case one, you might be doing a series of steps and which are different from what you are doing on test case two, and it might be a different from what you are doing on test case three. That might be a completely a functionality or some part of a data changes, right? So now let's create one more test case called TC2. I'll just copy this TC1 and I will just change it to TC2 here. Okay. So if you closely observe these two test cases, you can see this opening a browser and closing a browser are redundant code, right? You need to write it for each and every test case, right? So tomorrow, the problem with this approach is tomorrow, if you want to change the URL or if you want to change the driver object, what you need to do, you need to command update each and every test case. How we can avoid these things? So as you already know that we are using a TestNG. So in TestNG, we have two annotations called before method and after method, which will execute before each test case, right? Let's make use of those two annotations. I will create a two functions. Function name can be anything. Opening a browser, right? I will move this code here. Then I will create one more function. And closing this browser, I will move there. Okay. Okay. So I'm getting an error here because driver scope, I have kept it as a local. So I'll make it as a global now. Okay. No error gone here. Okay. So now either I can call these functions here, open browser and close browser. All right. So if you don't want to do that, in a TestNG, we have a annotation called before method. Okay. Then there's one more annotation called after method. So if you add these annotations for any function, how this works is, so this before method, so method means in TestNG, one test case. Remember, method means one test case. As annotation says before method, right? So this function will be automatically called before each method. Method means test case, right? And after method also same behavior, and this function will be called after each method. So now only we need to concentrate on the individual steps, independent steps that we need to perform on each test case, right? So what I will do, I will remove here also this opening a browser and closing a browser, because this function will be called before each test case, right? Let's say this and run this. See that whether we are able to open a browser or not. Test case started running. It's opening a browser. Second time test case is opening. Again, it opened a browser and closed it. So right now we are doing only printing the steps. That's why we don't have any other steps on a browser. Just it will print the message. You can see your console. It is printed test case 1, test case 2. You can see here test case 1 and test case 2. So one more advantage of using TestNG is TestNG will give a report, inbuilt report. No need to do extra coding. You can see here. So we got how many test cases we run and how many test cases are skipped, right? So TestNG is generating a huge set of reports. If you want to see those reports, once you run it, just go to your project and refresh it. You can see here test output folder, right? So this will be automatically generated. If you expand this, you can see here the n number types of TestNG reports are generated. So two important reporting things that you need to concentrate are index.html. I'll just open this with system editor. Then other one is emailable report. Okay. So this index.html consists of overall report, like how many test cases you have run and how many got passed, right? So if you click on this show link, it will also give you what all the test cases you have run. If there are any specific steps in your test case, that will also be displayed here. Currently, we are just using a system.println, right? That's why we are not getting much details here. Also, you can see here another type of a report, emailable report. This we can use to communicate to leadership team. This will also give you a high level information about what test cases run, how much time it will take, how much time it has taken, what is the total number of past test case, skipped, failed, right? Clear? Okay. Let's go back here. Okay. So now in one class we have created two test cases and both are working fine. So we try to eliminate that redundant code of opening browser and closing browser. Assume that if you have hundreds or thousands of test cases, then we cannot write all the test cases in a single class, right? Because it's not a good practice to have a class with a huge set of a code on it, right? So always your class should be smaller and crispy. So in order to modularize this, what we can do, let's assume that we have one more class which will hold some other cases. Let's say I will name it as a test set 2. Okay, this is one more class, and here we have a test cases like this, right? Let's say we have a test case 3 which is written in other class, right? Let's name this as a test case 3. So now when I try to run this test case 3, okay, you can see here test case 3 is completed its run. You can see here test case 3 is passed, right? It completed its run, but the browser is not opened, right? Why? So we have written opening and closing a browser in a annotation, before method and after method annotations. Okay, these annotations are always behaves as a local variables. That means the scope of these annotations will be applicable only for that class where you have declared it. So we have declared these annotations in login test cases, right? So these two annotations will be applicable only for these classes. Now, if I want to make these annotations applicable for other class test cases also, then I need to declare those things in this class. Now, if I try to run test case 3, it should open a browser. Then it should also close the browser after performing a steps. You can see now browser is opened and it should also close once test case 3 steps are performed. Okay. So if you observe this structure, again we have a redundant code, right? So we are writing these annotations on each and every classes. Tomorrow, if I wanted to make any changes to, let's say, if I want to make a URL change, or if I want to make a Chrome driver instead of Chrome driver, I wanted to make it as an Internet Explorer driver, then I need to update in each and every class. So how we can avoid these kind of a redundant declaration of the annotations? One way of doing that is using a inheritance concept. So I will create one more source folder, which I will name it as a base. So inside this base, if you want, you can create one package. I have declared it as one more base package, and here I will create a one class. So let's name it as a base annotations, or you can also name it as a base class. The class names are always depends on individual user. There is no restriction on what should be the class name. You can write any class name. So what I will do in this class, I will declare these annotations. Now what? Okay, I'm getting a driver object issue. That is because I might have not copied this line. Okay, let's copy this also into the base class. Okay, so now if I want to get these annotations in scope for any classes, what I need to do? I need to extend base class, right? So let's do same thing for the other class also, and remove redundant code. Now let's run test case 3 to see whether we are able to open browser this time or not. You can observe browser is opened, right? Now let's try other class where we have test case 1 and 2. Let's run this. You can see the browser is opened first time. Looks like again test case 3 only run, right? So what we'll do, You can right click on the class and just make it as run as TestNG, so that test1 and test2 will run. So for both the test cases, browser is opened, right? So now we have avoided all the redundant code for opening a closing browser by creating a base class. Clear? If you closely observe this open browser function, so you can see here, right, Chrome driver and the URL. So tomorrow if you want to change your application URL, or you wanted to change Chrome to a Internet Explorer driver, you need to come and update it here. So it's, you may think that it's easy to update it here, but let's consider the situation where in your team there are a lot of people who don't have even automation background. Then for them, if you ask them to update the application URL, or if you ask them to update the uh, driver from Chrome to IE and all, they might face a difficulty, right? Because they don't have any programming background. So now, how we can overcome from such kind of a situation? So the best way of doing is we can parameterize this configuration things from class to external file. You can use Excel for parameterizing, or you can use DB, or you can use XML, or you can use text file. Any such kind of a files you can use it for it. So now I will use one such file for externalizing this data. So I will use a property file here for removing this hard-coded data. So for that, what I will do, in my base folder, I will just create one more package. I will name it as a config. And this package I will use to write my configuration related code. And in my demo project, I will create one more source folder. I will name it as a resources. Okay. And this folder I will use to store all my configuration related files. So as I said, for this framework, I'm going to use a properties file, right? So I'll create one properties file here. I'll go to new. Then you can go to file. Let's enter any name. I will enter config dot properties. The file extension is properties. Okay. Click on finish. Now properties file is created. The beauty of this properties file is you can store any data in this configuration file, that properties file, in the form of key and value pair, right? Property file holds the values in key and value pair. So now if you observe your annotation, these two things, right? One is a URL and other one is a browser type. I wanted to parameterize, right? So I will come here. Let's say I will enter one URL, and here I will move my URL. Then another key I will use, and this one I will provide the browser type. Okay. So now what we'll do in this URL, will provide your application URL. So I'll remove this double quote. Then on browser type, I will update it to Chrome. Okay. So now in your annotation, so what we need to do, instead of hard coding it, we need to read those data from the config.property file. So we have already created a package called config here, right? So let's create a class here. I'll name it as read properties. Okay, so I will add a function here. Let's see, public void read. Okay, in Java we have a class called properties which can be used to read the property file. Okay, I'm just creating an object of it. Properties object is created. So in properties class we have a function called load which can be used to load the entire file. Okay, so if you observe here, this is taking a input stream, right? So let's create a file input stream object. So now you need to pass a file path here, right? So what is file path? I'm passing here a relative path. Dot indicates your current project. Then inside that it is resources, right? If you go to property, here you will find the full path, right? So but I don't want to use full path. I'm using a relative path. Okay. So now we need to handle a exception because when you are working with a file system object, we have a checked exception that is called IO checked exception. So we have to handle it. So I'm putting all these things into a try block. Let's pass this file object as a parameter for your load function. Okay. Let's handle a exception. Okay. At this point, I will just print stack trace of an exception. Okay. What does this U8 package? Okay. So now these details, once you load it, you need to reuse those things on your base class, right? So here what we'll do, we have to call this read, right? So here instead of a void, we'll pass this one, right? This property object, whatever we have, right? Whoever is calling this file, this function will pass them the property object which is pointing to the file. Okay, let's declare it as a global variable and at the end we'll return it. Okay, initially let's make it as a null. Now here in base class, what we'll do, we'll call that read property function, right? Read property function, and what we'll do here, o dot read is a function. Once you call this function, what it will do, it will read the your property file and it will return you the object. Okay. Okay, clear till here? So at this point, your property file is loading, but how to read it from the property file? So if you want to read anything from a property file, we have a function called get property. So it's a part of property class. if you use this get property, it will take one string parameter as the input, which indicates key, right? So previously, while discussing about property file, we have seen that every entry in this property file is of type key and value pair, right? So now if you want to read this URL is a key for it. You need to pass key to this function, right? So now, so this line, instead of hard coding it, here I will use this line. Okay. So now what happens? Before every test case, this before method will execute and which will call read property method, right? So what this read property class will do? Read property class will read all the properties, whatever you have listed under this configuration.properties. Okay. So this configuration.properties having the configuration details which are same for all test cases. It's not necessarily you need to read it for each and every test case, right? So but current approach is reading it for each and every test case. How can we avoid this? In TestNG, we have a annotation called before suit. So let's declare a function. Okay. So this part of a code reading my configuration file, I'll put it in before suit. So I'm getting an error message here because P, I have done it as a local declaration, right? So let's make this as a global declaration so that I can access it in a multiple functions. So now the beauty of this before suit annotation is this function will execute only once before the first test case executes from your suit. Suit means the set of test case. If you are running 10 test case, before the first test case, this read configuration will called and it will load all the configuration details into a P object. Now P object is having all the configuration details. Before each test case, when this before method calls, so we are referring this P which is already loaded in first test case. So using that P, we can read whatever the URL we wanted. Okay. So now, whenever you are reading configuration file, if you got any error message, then do you want to continue it? So in the current situation, if you go to read property, the current code what it does, it will just print the exception and your execution will continue. But I don't want to continue a execution when I fail to read the configuration because configuration is important, right? If you don't have a configuration, like if you don't have URL, if you don't know what browser to test, what it will run, right? So I wanted to stop my test cases when there is an exception. How I can do that? I can use system.exit function. Clear? Let's see whether URL is properly taking it from configuration file or not. I'm just running this test case. Let's see that whether URL is entering into the browser or not. Browser is opened. Let's see whether XYZ will come here or not. XYZ is coming, right? So now if you want to make sure that it's taking it from here only, we'll change this URL to google.com. Now we'll run the test case again. So browser is opened here. Let's see whether it will go to google.com or not this time. You can see it went to google.com. That means our code is working as expected, right? So the main agenda behind using this kind of a configuration files are separating your frequently changing properties, frequently changing configuration from the code so that if somebody from non-automation background resources are executing your script, it will be easy for them to make a changes to your configuration file easily, then making those changes on your classes. Okay, so tomorrow if they wanted to change URL, it will be easy for them to change URL here. If they wanted to change browser, it will be easy to change the browser. I'm not telling that only these two you need to separate it from your classes. You can separate anything that has a tendency to change during the execution or during the person to person, during the release, when person to person execution is happening, right? If somebody wanted to change those values, it will be easy if you separate them from your code. Now let's see how we can, you know, parameterize this opening a browser. So I will write one function here. I have just written a function called open here. Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is I have used a switch case. Okay. I've used a switch case. If my type is Chrome, then it should open a Chrome browser. If it is IE, then it should open a IE. If it is Firefox, then it should open a Firefox. You can add a one more case. If none of these cases are matches, then it should tell me the error message invalid type. Then it should exit. Okay. Let's say that we have written a function like this. Now, instead of hard coding Chrome driver here, what I will do, I will call this function open. Okay, for this open function, what I will do, anyway, I have a type of browser in my configuration, right? So I will pass that value here. That is this browser type, right? I'll just add it here. Okay, let's run this to see whether our configurations are correct or not. Let's run the test case 3. Okay, so now you can see here execution is started. Chrome driver is started execution. You can see browser is opened. It is navigating to the given URL, that is google.com. So that means whatever we have written is perfectly right. Clear? Thank you all.